Thank you so much for joining us for CBN Newswatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, a 15-year-old girl forced to recite a pornographic monologue at school, and the school accused of covering it up. Now, the American Center for Law and Justice has filed a lawsuit over the incident and telling CBN News just how bad the pornographic monologue was.
The mother couldn't even read it at the school board meeting without getting shut down. And blaming the student, again, the victimization is unbelievable. She could have said no. How outrageous is that?
Christians from around the world showing their support for Israel, marching in Jerusalem as part of this year's Jerusalem Day celebrations.
For me to be here as a German, to say that I love Israel, that I love the Jewish people, is such a special thing to me.
The battle over abortion now being carried out in the states, and pro-life supporters say they're winning.
Lawmakers in South Carolina are looking at their neighbors. They're looking at my home state of Florida, which passed a heartbeat law this year. They're looking at North Carolina with a 12-week law. Even Virginia considered a 15-week law this year, and we hope to see them do that again.
With growing concerns over how social media can be harmful for young people, now senators from both parties looking to establish national restrictions on how minors can use these popular online sites.
But I've also seen the tremendous downside. I've seen how some of their friends who are in trouble get very quickly spun into deep, dark corners of the internet.
Russians have planted deadly landmines throughout Ukraine.
174,000 square kilometers of the territory of Ukraine are contaminated by landmines laid by the occupier and Russian shells of various types that have not exploded.
We'll take a look at those who are risking their lives to remove these powerful explosives. And a buyer pays a huge price at auction for an ancient Hebrew Bible. We'll tell you how much he paid and where that manuscript will end up. Those stories and more today on CBN Newswatch.
This is CBN Newswatch.
We begin this half hour with the case of a Las Vegas area school teacher accused of forcing a 15-year-old girl to recite a pornographic monologue in front of her entire class, and the school reportedly covering it up. That is the allegation in a lawsuit brought by the American Center for Law and Justice, which filed suit this week over the incident, which happened last year. The ACLJ filed the suit in federal court against the Clark County School District. Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, ACLJ attorney Ben Cincy says the female student felt she had to comply because the obscene monologue was a graded assignment.
This wasn't some voluntary project or something on the side. This was a teacher in a trusted position of authority, and a teacher that this student particularly liked and trusted, presenting this assignment to this student. It's a graded assignment, consequences for refusing to perform it. And what was the assignment? Well, I'm not going to read the content of the obscene monologue that this student was made to read on your program. Even if I wanted to, I would fear violating FCC rules. And interestingly enough, the student's mother was shut down at the school board meeting for simply trying to read verbatim what her daughter, a 15-year-old, I emphasize, was given to read as the graded assignment. The mother couldn't even read it at the school board meeting without getting shut down. And by the way, if I could make it sound even worse, that's that the teacher has doubled down defending what she did and blaming the student because she could have said no. I ask you, she could have said no. I mean, you see this kind of behavior. So when you victimize someone and then you blame that person because she could have said no, that's horrendous.
Well, tell me about that, because I know teacher Kelly Hawes, as you said, contends a student could have just objected to reciting this monologue, and that's that obscene story written by another student, by the way, about a lesbian's rejection of a man. So how do you respond to that? Because what was the reason the teacher made this assignment to begin with?
Well, I don't know what the reason the teacher had Well, I suppose the assignment itself of giving students, having them draft monologues and for the other students in the class to practice, reading or performing a monologue.
And she rewrote them. Didn't she rewrite that? She saw them ahead of time and rewrote them before they were recited? She
says she edited it ahead of time, so it wasn't as bad as it was initially. But to your other question, I want to remind your viewers that a minor, especially this age of a minor, is legally incapable of consent to sexual activity, being coerced into performing or reading or reciting pornographic or obscene material. A minor cannot legally consent. There's a reason for that. Also, I want to emphasize that there are laws in place in Nevada and around the country that place a heightened obligation on individuals in positions of authority, ranging from clergy to teachers and the like, because recognizing the importance of that trusted position of authority that they have. So when a teacher, and indeed the student, our client in this case, said part of her rationale in going ahead and performing this was, well, I trusted my teacher, and she thinks this was okay. I guess it's okay, and I just have to, just trust her and just go ahead with it.
So, Ben, it's okay to read it in class, for a 15-year-old to read it out loud in class to her fellow students and to the teacher and whoever's present, but not for a parent who is of age to do it publicly at a school board meeting. Then something's wrong there, isn't it?
The twisted irony is it's almost too much to take. I mean, so it's not obscene. We can make a student read this. By the way, this isn't, and not that it justifies anything inherently, but just for context sake, because, for example, the First Amendment can be context specific. Certain things might be okay in one setting, but not another. This was not biology class, right? Where the student was given. This was just acting class. And also the context of where the mother attempted to read, simply recite that same dialogue, was the school board. That is the forum for parents to address issues with the school.
It is a free speech issue. I guess freedom of speech also is a freedom not to say something. So what do you expect is going to happen now? Is it an out-of-court settlement? Is that likely in this free speech case? They're
doubling down. They're defending it. They're basically contending that the school has the right to make a student read something like that for a grade, and that the school board has the right to shut down a parent for attempting to tell them what the school was making her 15-year-old read for a grade, and blaming the student. Again, the victimization is unbelievable. She could have said no. How outrageous is that?
Well, the teacher could have edited that so it wouldn't be an issue. Okay, Ben Sisney, the American Center for Law and Justice, thanks for sharing your perspective and this case with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
Also tonight on the global lane, Elon Musk says the war with China over Taiwan is inevitable. Can a conflict be averted? We'll explore. Also, criminal activity or unfounded allegations, a factual examination of the John Durham report and the Hunter Biden investigation. You can see the global lane on the CBN News Channel this evening at 8:30 Eastern. You can also watch it on the CBN News app or watch it on YouTube. Coming up, Christians from around the world showing their support for Israel marching in Jerusalem as part of Jerusalem Day celebrations. We'll have that story for you and other important stories when we come back. Stay with us. Christian supporters of Israel from around the world marched in Jerusalem on Tuesday as part of the Jerusalem Day celebrations.
So for me to be in Jerusalem, especially for me as a German, finding about my family history. My ancestors were Nazis, they were part of the Wehrmacht, part of the SA, the government. For me to be here as a German, to say that I love Israel, that I love the Jewish people, is such a special thing to me. So it's an honor to be here on the streets of Jerusalem with all the different nations here.
Jerusalem Day marks Israel's capture of the Old City and its Jewish holy sites in the 1967 Mideast War. The rally came a few days after a deadly 5-day burst of fighting between Israel and militants in the Gaza Strip. Israel has deployed more than 2,000 police for a march today by flag-waving Israelis. Authorities say the beefed up security is a determined effort to ensure the march passes without violence. Back here at home, and the ripple effects are still being felt a year after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, with Americans battling over abortion access front and center across the country this week. Wednesday, a federal appeals court heard arguments in a lawsuit seeking to stop the use of a popular abortion pill. and a new round of states are set to consider bans after lawmakers in North Carolina overrode the governor's veto of a bill restricting the procedure. Caitlin Berg brings us a look at where things stand in America's ongoing battle over abortion.
At least 15 states have moved to either ban or curtail abortion services in the last 11 months. North Carolina remained as one of the few states with fewer restrictions until Tuesday, when the Republican-led legislature pushed through a 12-week abortion ban.
The House has overridden the governor's veto and the bill becomes law.
That law is the Care for Women, Children, and Families Act. Beginning July 1st, abortion access drops from 20 weeks to 12, with exceptions in cases of rape or incest or when the life of the mother may be at risk.
It also paired that protection for the unborn with $160 million earmarked for programs to support moms and families all across the state.
Other states are considering similar measures. In Nebraska, a bill banning gender-affirming surgeries for minors and restricting abortions after 12 weeks is set for a final vote.
We owe it to kids to let them grow up so they can make these decisions as adults.
If you vote for this, you will have buckets and buckets of blood on your hands.
Lawmakers in South Carolina are debating a 6-week abortion ban. And if that becomes law, it would nearly wipe out abortion access in the South. Katie Daniel, state policy director for Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, says life is winning.
Lawmakers in South Carolina are looking at their neighbors. They're looking at my home state of Florida, which passed a heartbeat law this year. They're looking at North Carolina with a 12-week law. Even Virginia considered a 15-week law this year, and we hope to see them do that again.
As states continue to debate these restrictions, on the federal level, the fate of the popular abortion pill mifepristone once again rests with the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The FDA calls the drug a safe way to terminate a pregnancy. Anti-abortion groups, though, argue the agency didn't follow protocol in approving the pill, making it unsafe.
When they originally approved the drug, they didn't follow the federal requirements that say before you can approve drugs for minors, you have to actually study the effects of these drugs on minors.
The outcome of Wednesday's hearing could determine whether the drug remains on the market.
The American people deserve better than a politically driven agency that's just trying to get outcomes favorable to its friends in the abortion industry.
The FDA's current regulations also allow women to obtain mifepristone without visiting a doctor in person, and they can receive the drug in the mail. Regardless of how the federal appeals court rules, an appeal to the Supreme Court is almost certain. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Montana has become the first state to enact a complete ban on TikTok. Republican Governor Greg Gianforte saying today Montana takes the most decisive action of any state to protect Montanans' private data and sensitive personal information from being harvested by the Chinese Communist Party. A TikTok spokesperson argued the law infringes on people's First Amendment rights and is unlawful, but didn't say if the company would sue. Some lawmakers and government officials say the app could be used to allow the Chinese government to have access to information on U.S. citizens or push Beijing propaganda. Some TikToks say that something TikTok says has never happened. Parents across the country have been worried about the impact social media is having on their children. Multiple states have already passed restrictions, and Congress is considering national regulations. The concerns came from both sides of the aisle. So what could a possible bill look like? Brody Carter brings us this story.
4 senators, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, telling the Associated Press they represent millions of American parents who believe social media companies have too much negative influence on teens and younger kids. So they've written a simple, straightforward measure that's easy to understand.
Normally you see a bill come out of D.C. that is sometimes thousands of pages long. This one's 8.
The bill has 3 key points. Kids under 13 would be banned from social media. Children 13 through 17 would need a parent or guardian's consent to create an account, and it would forbid social media companies from using algorithms to recommend content for users under 18.
And I think people appreciate the simplicity. If a parent can't understand the bill, it's hard for them to rally behind it.
Senator Chris Murphy has seen both the positives and negatives of social media.
Sometimes the silly and entertaining content that they get on those sites brings joy to their life, but I've also seen the tremendous downside. I've seen how some of their friends who are in trouble get very quickly spun into deep, dark corners of the internet.
Senator Brian Schatz says the growing evidence is clear. Social media is making kids more depressed and wreaking havoc on their mental health. The National Institutes of Health found children under 18 are susceptible to social media health-related problems, including depression, eating disorders, and anxiety. The CDC shows 60% of girls using social media report feeling persistent sadness or hopelessness, with 30% seriously considering suicide. The senator's bill is one of several measures being proposed in Washington, calling for stricter regulations on social media companies. Senator Tom Cotton says their bill puts parents back in control of what their kids experience online.
I've had so many people reach out to me and say, thank you for proposing a solution, for helping me get back my responsibility, my rights as a parent in the digital world that I have in the real world.
The senators know there will be pushback from tech companies, and any legislation proposing to regulate big tech and social media will face major challenges in Congress itself, including disagreements about overregulation and questions about civil liberties. So it remains to be seen if any bill can successfully move through both the House and Senate. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Still ahead, it's an area in Ukraine that is twice the size of Austria, and it's littered with landmines and tripwires. Russian forces have buried deadly traps across Ukraine. We're going to meet the people who are risking their lives to disarm them right after this. Another casualty from the war in Ukraine. Farmers are afraid of planting their spring crops because of the risk of setting off deadly landmines planted below the surface. Emergency services are working to clear the fields of the powerful explosives, risking their own lives in the process. Chuck Holton brings us that story now from Kyiv.
It's spring here in Ukraine, and if the farmers are going to have a fall harvest, they need to get seeds in the ground soon. But one new worry, aside from the weather and pests, is slowing them down. Something like this.
This farmer hit a mine with his tractor, and in areas liberated from Russian occupation, hundreds of thousands of mines litter the fields. Dozens have died trying to plant their crops.
174,000 square kilometers of the territory of Ukraine are contaminated by landmines laid by the occupier and Russian shells of various types that have not exploded. This contaminated area is twice the size of Austria. These are hundreds of thousands of anti-personnel and anti-tank mines, MLRS rockets, aerial bombs and mortar shells, which, without exploding, get stuck in the fields, in the remains of houses, and even tripwires with grenades, which the Russians left specifically against civilians, ordinary people.
Farmers have to clear these out. They sometimes strike them with their tractors. You have people who will be discovering for the next over 100 years unexploded shells in one way, shape, form, or another.
The state emergency services are working overtime to help the farmers plant crops safely. Still, they need more workers and are hiring as fast as they can.
This is a very stressful job, so we first do a psychological assessment to make sure they can handle it. From there we have shortened the training to only 1 month. Once they pass their exams, we send them right out to the front lines for on-the-job training.
This unit, who consists of 77 guys, they are all operational. They are all working on a front line. And I found in them this kind of a internal peace, which is, I think, super important for any pyrotechnic or demining guys.
This group has been together since long before the war started, so they have plenty of experience with demining.
Before the war started, we were already very busy. More than 10,000 explosive objects were found in 2021 alone, and most of them were from the Second World War.
The job they have to do now is much, much more dangerous.
Once areas are deoccupied, we are the first to go in. We find explosives wired into doors, between blankets on beds, even in children's toys, where if you push the button, the toy explodes.
They're demining something that is invisible, and nobody expects to have it right there in your toy or under your pillow. And that's like, they are doing it. So they are the ones who knows and who can make a change.
And doing the job takes a high emotional toll.
When you see what they are doing to Ukraine and Ukrainians, it's hard to think of them as humans anymore.
These missiles right behind me are just a small fraction of the more than 14,000 munitions that have been rendered safe by the State Emergency Services of Ukraine. And this training facility is bringing up the next generation of EOD specialists to try to render safe the hundreds of thousands of square kilometers that are having unexploded ordnance dumped on it during this war.
But the number of mines in the ground keeps growing as long as Russia holds any territory in Ukraine. So the greatest hope is that the Russian army will be defeated this year.
I don't want to live in a world where any humans would have the idea to harm a child or any other human beings.
This war will linger for a very long time, and the longest lasting remnant will be those unexploded ordinances.
Reporting from Kyiv, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Coming off, a buyer pays a huge price for an ancient Hebrew Bible. We'll tell you who purchased it and how much was paid and where that manuscript is going to end up when we come back. Stay with us. An 1,100-year-old Hebrew Bible sold for $38 million. It happened in New York on Wednesday. It is one of the world's oldest surviving biblical manuscripts. The leather-bound, handwritten parchment volume contains a nearly complete Hebrew Bible. Sotheby's says former U.S. Ambassador to Romania, Alfred H. Moses, bought the manuscript on behalf of the American Friend of ANU and donated it to ANU Museum of the Jewish People in Tel Aviv. That is where it will join a collection. Beautiful. Time now for your Thursday Thankful. And I hope you'll join me in this quick prayer of gratitude. God, thank you for your love. It is indeed unfailing. It is a love that chased me all the way to Calvary's cross through death, hell, and the grave. And I am most grateful. Father, I thank you. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. I want to remind you, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel at any time, as well as online. That's cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories. Email us, newswatch@cbn.com. And then join us right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.